Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would cover this video because it kind of came up as something I've discussed on my main channel, my fitness channel, a little bit, and it has to do with the FBI's findings on the 9mm. This is something that was grudgingly hard for me to accept when they released this report less than a year ago. I read all of it. I have a copy of it on my computer. I don't really know how to upload it to you guys, but if you guys dig around, you can find it. It's well over 50 pages if I recall, and I read the entire report, and I want to break down a lot of this into layman's terms for you so that everyone kind of understands where the FBI is coming from on this one. They've determined that the 9mm, which is what I personally carry, and I generally carried 9mm even before this report years ago, although I have owned 45s also, and have been comfortable with both. I preferred 9mm for everyday carry for a host of reasons. Now, the FBI's findings were very controversial because, as we know, the FBI, for a long back history that I don't want to cover in this video, had the 40 S&W developed to replace their 9mm way back in the 80s. And again, that was very controversial, but there's a number of things that the FBI used to determine why they prefer the 9mm. And we need to discuss some basic things regarding handguns. There are a lot of myths out there regarding handguns. First of all, that handguns have stopping power or knockdown power in any caliber. Handguns are simply, they do not have enough kinetic energy, and they do not have enough velocity to really have much what you would think of as stopping power, killing power, or knocking something down. Even the most powerful handguns, generally even things like 45 or like a 44 Magnum, do not have more kinetic energy when they hit you than a fairly modest punch. Like, they don't hit you as hard as a heavyweight boxer hitting you. When they hit you, they don't have enough energy to move you more than a few inches, and they certainly don't have enough energy to knock you down. Now, there are psychosomatic responses to being shot, and the FBI has addressed a lot of this, but that doesn't have to do with actual physics as far as a bullet hitting you and knocking you down. As far as lethality goes, handguns are not particularly lethal unless they strike something like the heart, or the brain, the central nervous system. And the only time that a handgun actually generally stops someone dead in their tracks, other than through a psychosomatic response, is going to be immediate damage to the central nervous system, the brain stem, the brain, something like that. The second fastest way that they drop you is generally direct damage to the heart. If they penetrate the heart, particularly a hollow point that's going to expand, it will cause you to bleed out very rapidly. You lose blood to your brain. You go down really quick. Usually within 15 to 30 seconds, you're out. But any other wound, generally handguns wound through laceration and cutting. In other words, they drop a target by causing them to bleed out. By causing enough damage to arteries, blood vessels, tissue, that they actually bleed to death or bleed until they lose blood pressure and go down, go into shock, or go unconscious. So this idea that they have a lot of stopping power is just a myth. And the other thing that they pointed out is the hydrostatic shock myth. Hydrostatic shock exists with rifle rounds because most rifle rounds are moving 2 or 3 times the speed of sound. Well beyond the sound barrier, they tend to cause what we call a secondary wound channel through them making a sonic boom as they pass through tissue, and it's particularly disruptive if they happen to hit a bone and send shards of bone flying everywhere through a person who's been shot. Handguns simply do not have this same effect. So you have what we call a permanent cavity, which is the hole they physically cut, and a temporary cavity, which is stretching of the tissue behind the wound channel. Now, sometimes you will see in various ballistics tells and just testing, you'll see secondary cavities in the gel, but the thing is, when we do autopsies on people shot with handguns, the surgeons and coroners can't find any actual evidence of the secondary cavity, so it doesn't actually exist in human tissue. It's just a stretching of the tissue, and it returns to normal. When they look at it, it doesn't seem to cause any permanent damage or tissue disruption. It's not going to cause any real harm unless it's, again, to something really sensitive like the nervous system, the brain. But as far as muscle tissue, arteries, things like that, it tends to stretch and then bounce back. Humans are very elastic. So all the damage is caused by a handgun is actually a direct result of the physical cutting that the bullet makes as it slices through. It is basically like, think of it as a blade cutting through, or a multi-pointed blade as a hollow point opens up. And it doesn't do any real permanent lasting damage beyond that. And it certainly doesn't have the power to knock you down. And it's been noted that due to movies, media, things like that, how people think they're supposed to react when they get shot, that is how human beings react when they're shot with a handgun, based upon how they think they're supposed to react. And someone might get knocked down or throw themselves down or fall down if they know that they've suffered a direct hit, and they're not maybe angry enough or motivated enough to keep going. However, if they don't know they're hit, oftentimes people get wounded multiple times by even the most powerful handguns, and they keep fighting until the blood loss hits them, or they see their own blood or their blood pressure drops, and they go down as a result of it. They do not get knocked down. It's a psychosomatic response until the blood pressure drops, and then they kind of black out or go into shock from, again, blood loss. But that is how handguns take people down, barring, again, a direct heart shot or, best case, a central nervous system shot. Well, the issue is that most people can't even hit a moving target. Most police officers in shootings, trained police officers, only connect with about 30% of the rounds they fire. So if they empty a 10-round magazine, they're going to hit on average with 3 of them. And on a moving target, very, very few people have enough training and skill and practice to successfully get a headshot. So they generally are trained to fire at center mass. And this includes FBI agents. We're not dealing with SWAT teams here. These are just people who maybe go to the range a couple times a month and plink. These are not highly trained operators or special forces members or SWAT team members, regular street cops, FBI, people like that, who a lot of people would think of as really skilled marksmen, but they really aren't always. A few are, but the majority are not. So you generally have to wound with center mass. Now, what the FBI has found is that with the modern ammunition, for a host of reasons, that the various calibers, there's very, very little difference when they compare ballistics gel when you use the best ammo that is out there, premium law enforcement or home defense rounds made by companies like Federal, Hornady, Spear, Corbon, Barnes, the top companies who make their highest premium line ammunition. We're not talking about cheaper ammo. When modern ammunition is used, it is the premium grade law enforcement or home defense ammo. The ballistics are very, very similar in terms of total wound trauma. And I know for me this was hard to accept until I really stepped back and realized that the reason it's the same, because a lot of people would think, okay, the 45 or the 40 S&W is a bigger diameter than the 9mm. It's a heavier bullet. You're going to penetrate deeper. It's starting bigger, so it's going to expand bigger. But the truth is that's simply not the case when we look at what actually happens in ballistic testing with the best ammo that's out there. And there's a number of reasons for it that we don't fully understand why all of it is, but part of it is that we know that 9mm is the most popular round in the world for law enforcement and military. A lot of companies around the world have put a lot of research and development into maximizing the velocity while minimizing the pressure of the 9mm round with various loads, various grain weights of bullets, using different powder configurations. So we've really maximized in recent years the ability of the 9mm round. And because we've done that, we're able to push the most velocity with the lowest pressure due to the most research there. We're able to get higher velocities for the grain weight out of it than we used to be able to get. And as a result of that, higher velocities with any given grain weight with a good, well-made hollow point is going to expand more rapidly. And because a lot of the heavier 9mm that are out now, some of the best self-defense and law enforcement loads are the heavier bullets, they have a higher sectional density, and this may be why they do so well in testing. A higher sectional density is going to give you a higher initial penetration and inertia with less slowdown. But because it's longer, because again, the diameter is fixed, so the heavier you go with the bullet, the longer you have to make it, and you get a higher sectional density. Because it's longer with a deeper cavity, it gives it more potential for expansion. Because of the higher initial sectional density, it may be slowing down not as rapidly. So you end up with a pretty fast moving bullet with a high sectional density that expands really quick and maybe doesn't slow down as fast and started 100 or 150 feet per second than a comparable 45 ACP. So what ends up happening with comparable rounds, when we measure it, the 9mm gets just as much total tissue volume. The amount of volume when we check the size of the hole of the permanent cavity is just as high with the best ammo from the 9mm as it is with the 40 and the 45 now, and in some cases it actually beats it by as much as 5 to 8%, which again would seem counterintuitive till you look at all the other factors going on there. So the reality is it actually causes equal and in some cases slightly superior tissue trauma, which again didn't happen in the past. It's just the technology has come a long way and we've maximized the capacity of this cartridge. Now, the reason that's a big deal to the FBI, and it's not just an issue of personal preference anymore for them, is because if the 9mm is capable of at least equaling, and I used to believe it was less than that, but I still chose 9mm, but if it's equal to the others in terms of wounding capacity and tissue trauma, that makes it a superior round for a number of reasons. Number one, it has less recoil than most other semi-auto cartridges who are doing comparable amounts of tissue trauma. Less recoil means faster follow-up shots, higher rate of fire with a greater degree of accuracy when rapid firing, because again, more control, faster follow-up shots that are well placed, well aimed. So you've got that going because the bullets are smaller in diameter and the cartridges are smaller in diameter and weigh less. You can fit more of them in a magazine of the same size and in the same size gun. So you end up with a higher ammo capacity, lighter recoil for faster follow-up shots with the same wound ballistics, and in some cases better. That gives you more firepower, more ammo, more accuracy, higher rate of accurate fire with the same amount of damage. That makes it superior. Not only that, because of the lower pressures, the lighter kick on it, it wears out guns slower. Firearms last longer, ammo is cheaper, and as a result of that, it's easier to practice with. It's cheaper to practice with, less wear and tear in the practice, so you're going to practice with it more. More practice equals more accuracy, which gives you better shot placement when you're in a life and death scenario and you actually need to use your weapon. So that makes it superior all around in regards to that, not only in terms of the wound ballistics, but the capacity, the training ability, the cost. So this is why it's been declared to be the best round for this purpose. It's not even about personal preference anymore. Normally we would always say these things are just personal preference. But when the data is showing all of those things, it becomes clearly superior. And when you're dealing with a very large scale force like the FBI, when they have a very superior, tactically clear choice, that is what they are going to do. That's what they're going to recommend. And again, all the data is interesting on this. I mean, the 9mm has really come a long way since the 80s when they changed and got away from it. Modern 9mm ammo with the best stuff out there is so much better than it used to be. And so that's why the FBI carries 9mm. That's why I carry it. For me, I used to carry it purely due to the other constraints. The fact that I could carry more ammo, fire it more rapidly, more accurately. It was cheaper to train on. Even if it did slightly less damage, it was all about shot placement. Being able to train cheaper to be more accurate on it, higher ammo count, more firepower, for me made up for what I thought was a slightly lower tissue trauma. But now with the best ammo, the tissue trauma is equal or better to the other round. So all those other advantages come with no disadvantage anymore. And so that's what we're talking about here. And so again, the caliber war has been settled by the FBI, and that's why I personally carry 9mm these days, and that's what I advocate for most people. And I think it's not as big of a deal for a lot of men who don't carry about a mild disadvantage. But as I was saying in another video, when it comes to females who don't have always the same upper body strength, they don't always have the ability to handle a higher recoil round, these things start to make a bigger and bigger deal. They become more important, more critical. And for a lot of guys who maybe just for their personal preference decide they want a 45 or 40 S&W, they need to consider that maybe if they want to be standardized in their household, shoot the same handgun or use the same ammo that their wife, girlfriend, fiance, whatever uses, then they need to consider these advantages as far as a 9mm goes and stop being silly about personal choice and just look at the hard data and realize it's in their best interest to have at least their girl use a 9mm. And again, if their girl's going to use a 9mm, you really want to be smart about standardizing your household. It's something for you to consider. So that's kind of the whole point of all this and why this matters even for civilians, preppers, other people outside of the law enforcement community, just for regular Joes. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.